Hi, I am Yen-Hua of National Changhua University of Education. It's my honor to introduce my study for you. First of all, I have some questions. Have you ever had those questions? Why the manager preferred him over me? Why his pay higher than me? Why he get off work earlier than me? Why his performance higher than me? Why he get a promotion before me? Why his work easier than me? Why his ability better than me? And why do you think so? Because social comparison. You compare with your colleague and then you have some emotion. So what are the determinants of workplace envy? It is generally believed that it is caused by upward comparison, like good grades, a good salary, and a fast promotion rate can trigger emotions.
Comparison is a relative concept. We take ourselves as a reference point and then compare ourselves to others. This is the concept of relative input and relative output.
But this point of view may be forgot an important factor in comparison process. So we think based on the equity theory, it needs to be considered. According to the equity theory, social comparison emotions can be divided into 4 types. Relative input high and relative output high, you maybe feel admiration. Relative input high and relative output low, you maybe feel pity. Relative output low and relative input low, you maybe feel schadenfreude. Relative input low and relative output high, you maybe feel envy.
Here are the definitions of these 4 emotions. Admiration, when people appreciate the achievements or accomplishments of others and want to improve themselves to achieve that state. Envy, an unpleasant and often painful emotion characterized by inferiority, hostility, and resentment resulting from the realization that another person or group of people enjoys something we desire but do not possess. Pity, feeling compassion for the disadvantages of others and worrying and fearing about the possibility of similar hardships in the future. Schadenfreude, feeling happy about the misfortunes of others. Equity sensitivity is an individual difference that characterizes how individuals react to situations perceived to be equitable or inequitable. Even if a person is faced with an unfair situation as defined by equity theory, such as when someone else gets more reward than they do, some people may feel that it does not matter whether they get it or not, so equity sensitivity is also taken into consideration in this study.
This page is relationship framework in describing the relationship between the variables. According to the equity theory and the social competency, so we drew it. Relative output will affect social competency-based emotions. A variable that determines how the relationship between and relative input and the emotion changes. Across the levels of a relationship variable, an equity sensitivity will modulation all. Data will be collected via the experimental methodology.
Participants will read carefully constructed and realistic scenarios to assess the joint effects of relative input and relative output on emotional reactions to social comparisons. This page is the experimental vignette detail about admiration story, bringing yourself into the role of Ban. Your classmate Mark graduated a year earlier than you. He always works hard than you. This story is about your story in Research Institute. This page is the experimental vignette detail about Envy's story. Similarly, bringing yourself into the role of Ban. Your classmate Mark graduated a year earlier than you. He always works lazier than you. This story is about your story in Research Institute.
This page is the experimental vignette detail about Sheldon for the story summary of some fragments of the story. Similarly, bringing yourself into the role of Ban. Your classmate Mark did not finish their studies, and also he always works later than you. This story is about your story in Research Institute. This page is the experimental vignette detail about Petty Story. Summary of some fragments of the story. Similarly, bringing yourself into the role of Ban. Your classmate Mark graduated 2 years later than you, but he always works hard than you. This story is about your story in Research Institute.
Methods. MANOVA will be performed to test the two-way interaction effects of relative input and relative output, as well as the three-way interactions of relative input X, relative output X, equity sensitivity. Expected results. Conclusion. Contribution. By examining the effects of relative input, relative output, and equity sensitivity on emotional reactions to social comparisons. The present study contributes to SED light on how workplace envy is induced, when it will be more pronounced, and how workplace envy is related to emotional reactions such as admiration, sympathy, and schadenfreude.
Thank you for listening.